Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Frontline Advantage. Today we have Kelsey Lay. Kelsey and I met one another when she spoke at the Women in Manufacturing Summit in 2024. And although I wasn't able to attend in person this year, or this past year, I was able to catch up with many of the sessions that really we thought would be beneficial for our community. Kelsey's being one of those. I reached out to Kelsey because she has a huge focus on managers, believing that managers are the number one driver of avoidable turnover in many environments, including manufacturing. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Kelsey.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Welcome, Kelsey. So, what really resonated with me was some slides you had that bad managers are the number one reason for employee turnover, yet only 20% of managers strongly agree their organizations help them manage people effectively. Let's start with that. Why is there this big gap around what training and what managers are looking for, and yet them being the number one driver of avoidable turnover?
It's a great question. I really think the role of the manager has changed. And so something I talk a lot about is that the managers are the bridge from strategy to execution. They are the connector from the executive team to the rest of the team. And I just find that managers, they're getting support in a lot of different ways. But their day-to-day is a really challenging role where they're navigating not only their own personal experiences, but holding space and capacity for all of their team's experiences. So when we talk about managing a software solution or managing a manufacturing floor, it's a very linear path, but managing people, we like to say, is like the lunar. So you get different challenges every single day that it's hard to come up with a set system that's going to make management easy. And so when you're a manager, you're kind of choosing the hard road. And so there's not a quick fix.
Do you get the sense that a lot of managers actually want to become good managers, but it's, as described in the quote, just the organization doesn't seem to prioritize training for them to become good managers?
Yes. And I think it's hard for managers to articulate what they need to become good managers. I think we often see a leadership style and we either want to replicate it or we want to run from it. But we're not really sure how we want to show up as a leader or how we can motivate a team to get different results. I think it's just a multifaceted challenge because I think organizations, even organizations that have learning and development teams, and teams that are studying behaviors and habits and trying to close this gap, managers are still finding, one specific course or one specific experience or one specific development opportunity isn't giving them the fulfillment that they want. So it's challenging.
Absolutely. And it has such an effect on so many people. So this multifaceted approach, I'm a manufacturer. I realize I want to do something for my managers. Mm-hmm. Kelsey provides training, coaching, community. Tell us how you intervene. You come into these environments. What's the before and after in the intervention you do, the magic you have that helps really transform environments?
Yeah. So I come from a teaching and an education background. So curriculum design and identifying objectives in our learning environments and closing those gaps with skills is where my strength is, or where I started. But what I realized when I started training managers was I could give them the skills and the frameworks and we could start putting that into place. But navigating the people dynamics of how come my team isn't following through on this, or how come there's still resistance to this, or this person is still running late, that's not shifting, although they are checking the boxes on what they're supposed to be doing from a skill side. And that's where I got really curious about coaching, because it's more about the human behavior side of things that is an imperative part of the management practice. And then layering in the community element of normalizing that Often in management, and I was a manager with this mindset as well, but I felt stuck. I felt stuck in the middle instead of being empowered by being in the middle. And so I felt like there's nothing I can do. It's not my problem. The executives have to figure that out, or my team just needs to perform better. And I was pulling myself out of the system or out of the problem. But really, what we do with coaching is encourage them to lean into the problem and into the system and think about how can we really leverage the humans that are around us to get the change that we want. And that can really only be done through more of a coaching and a community approach versus just a training approach. So I specifically choose the 3 prongs of training, coaching, and community with a lot of intention, because I've tried them separately and they work a lot better when they're together.
Yeah, so there's this component, you talk about the human component and the people around you. Tell us maybe some stories or examples where there's involvement beyond the training for a manager. How do they sort of get that input from their people on what they actually need to become better managers?
Oftentimes we get a lot of friction when there's a change in the system. So there's a new boss that's showed up. There's a merger and acquisition that's happening. There's a new product that's launching that's causing, more stress within the organization. So kind of at these inflection points where things get hard and they're not going as seamlessly as they have even yesterday or 2 hours ago. And so when we come up against these hard points, we all experience resistance. And so if we can start to normalize and give our managers this language around when change is happening, which is, as we all know, changes are constant. When change is happening, your people, yourself, your leadership are going to experience resistance in different ways. So this is the communications and the skills that we're going to, and like the software, maybe a new software training that we need to provide to leverage the knowledge base of our people. But we can't just approach it with knowledge. We need to bring this human side of holding space for this change and for this resistance. Without acknowledging the resistance in these challenging times, change takes a lot longer. People leave because they just don't like it. It's uncomfortable. We see a lot of turnover in these high change times. Or we just see that like receding from ownership and like, well, I'm going to just show up and collect my paycheck at this point, but I'm not going to put extra effort in because I don't like what I see, what's happening. So I'm going to sit on the sidelines and just do the bare minimum.
Yeah, it's this time of change is becoming more prevalent with AI, automation, perhaps fear increasing, and companies that want to implement these changes but don't want to include their people in it are probably more likely to face that resistance you're talking about. We worked with a wonderful, still very in touch with her, manufacturing leader, one of our clients, who, when there was an element of change, had her workforce read the book, Who Moved My Cheese?
Oh,
And she asked people, are you familiar with that book?
I'm not, but I'm adding it to my
It's not a very long book. So she had her workforce read the book and then asked a series of, I think maybe just 3 or 4 questions, like which character do you relate to in terms of how they react to change? Because that book kind of allowed people to say, oh, I'm like this person. And it kind of allowed her to get a sense of how people felt about the changes that were occurring. So she could, in a way, empathize and then also be prepared to handle kind of whatever people's reactions would be. And I think it's this idea of kind of bringing people along on the journey that these changes are occurring, or they could be, more traditional type changes like you're talking about, whether it's M&A or things happening within organizations, reorgs, managers, whatever it may be, just making people feel like their manager is looking out for them. They're there for them. They're part of that process, which is obviously something you specialize a lot in. And I think at times, like you were just talking about, sometimes managers pull themselves away and pull out of things when in reality they actually need to lean in and over communicate and make people feel comfortable because everyone is feeling this sense of concern or fear. Is that accurate in terms of how what you were talking about?
Absolutely. I really appreciate this example of using a book, a podcast episode, 1 3-minute article as a resource or an inspiration or a grounding tool to get this shared language and to kind of put the conversation and model that that what we're experiencing has been researched, has been experienced by many, many people before us. And so we can get through this together. Let's create some shared language. Let's talk about it in a way and normalize that this is what we're going through and use that to help guide the group. And I think what happens is I've seen, this a leadership change, right? So the executive team tells you that there's a change in staffing happening. Okay. That's really their job is kind of done. I mean, they can communicate roles and expectations, but then as a manager, that information has been translated. And now me and my team are kind of swimming around a pond like a group of ducks. And we'll just keep swimming in a circle until I realize, oh, wait, this is my job. I need to help my team understand how this change is going to impact our department. And so now I get to take the lead and say, okay, we have this change happening at this organization. What is a resource or a tool that I can ground us in? Let's figure out a game plan. Let's get together, talk about the change, and then in follow up in one-on-ones and say, how are you navigating the change specifically? How does this impact your role? It doesn't? Great. It impacts your role a little bit? Great. Like it impacts your role a lot. Let's put our focus and energy there to support that initiative. But that is the job of the managers, is to catch all of these new company-wide initiatives that are shifting and break that down for the team.
Fantastic. Kelsey, we've been talking about managers in the organizations. I want to focus now on all the people who actually have to report into these managers within these organizations. Yes. I have a conversation later today with someone who shared with me she has 18-month-old twins, and you and I have talked about family and kids. She works at an organization where, at least in her case, her manager is not very supportive of this idea of her focus or her needing to kind of spend time at times with her kids. What advice do you have for someone that's in a position where their manager doesn't actually seem to be supportive, the exact kind of crisis or the pain that you're after? Mm-hmm. What would you tell them to do if that was them?
Yeah. I can relate so deeply. I have a 3-year-old and another one on the way, and people that don't have kids, like it's a different world. And you don't realize how much they impact, especially starting at 18 months, sicknesses come into play and daycare and school schedules and all of the things. And so it's just a huge part of your identity. And so I think part of the support for that parent is normalizing that not everyone is experiencing what you're experiencing at home. And it is, especially as a new parent, it's messier than it's ever been. And that's okay. And so the way you show up at work will look differently. Not better, not worse. It just might look differently. And so how you communicate when and where you can show up is also really important. And allowing that to come from a proactive place instead of a reactive place, because I have been up all night with a toddler that's throwing up, and then I show up to work and my boss just doesn't get it. And then I start to realize some patterns of like, oh, if this is happening, I need to communicate a bit more ahead of time so that my manager can support me in a way that I need them to support me. So I think there's that piece of, I'm not putting it back on the individual, but I do think the individual needs to just reflect and acknowledge and give themselves space and grace as they're going through this transition. and then be able to put together that, like, hey, in our next one-on-one, can I talk to you about, I'm noticing some trends. I'm going through a major life change right now. I love my job. I want to be here. I want to be, but I have some hesitations because I feel like my performance or how I can show up is different. And so, can we talk about what that can look like just so that we can be back on the same page? And it might just all be in my head, or maybe you're also seeing that my performance is changing. One of my favorite sayings, because I have a hard time with hard conversations, is that not all conversations have to be confrontations. And so a conversation like this around my personal life is changing dramatically in front of my eyes, and I don't even know what next month will look like. How can we meet in the middle here?
Love that point that not all conversations need to be confrontations. And you also talked about the importance of communicating and being proactive, getting ahead of things.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't control how people react. So if you have a manager that you may perceive may not handle it as well as you'd like, they don't seem to be as open and inviting around these types of topics, and you present that, then you may have clarity on whether that's an organization or a division you want to remain part of. And it may be a sad reality, but it's better to kind of, as you're talking about, do what you can to kind of bring it to light, which I don't think a lot of people feel comfortable doing. It requires that level of kind of confidence, and also to be comfortable. We started the conversation talking about, we met women in manufacturing or through the summit itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're at an organization that doesn't appreciate and value you and the women who are helping with their families, then there are a number of other organizations, we're talking about manufacturing specifically, but in other industries as well, where there are employers that will openly say, we want to hire women. Yeah. We realize the value, the contribution. So
and not only women, but moms. Like, we want moms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And WIM has, talent career fairs for women, as well as a mom conference later this year. It's a virtual conference. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Like, go seek where you're valued and wanted if you're in a position where your manager, your organization doesn't actually step up and execute when you really need them most, given what you've already hopefully contributed at the organization.
Yeah. And I will just say one little layer there, because I've actually had maybe 3 coaching calls this year, and we're 5 weeks into the year, where people 2 minutes in are like, I think I need to leave. I think I need to be on a different team. But once we start to get into the specifics of, well, I don't want to have that conversation. Well, I don't know what my boundaries are. Well, I don't, like, things are changing on my end. And so I would rather just remove myself than get in the weeds and get curious and get my hands dirty and have the difficult conversations that are difficult for me. If you do the hard work and you're still not getting the response back, it is time to go look for a new team or a new company. But I think it's a growth opportunity to say, like, I'm hitting a wall. How can I give it my best and give it my all and have the tough conversations before I jump ship?
I think that's just a great message. So for all of you out there listening, and you need that confidence and that conviction, that support. I think, Kelsey, your work, not only for managers, but even for people within industry who are looking to kind of deal with these situations, you could be a sounding board for them around how to handle those and coach them in those types of tough situations. So this is fantastic. Kelsey, anything else you want to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think that's just the magic of coaching and where it can really improve retention, because all 3 of those people that I coached this year so far, by the end of that hour, decided that they were going to have a conversation instead of jump ship. And so just like one piece at a time, and without that sort of support and someone that can be kind of a third party, we do see people jumping ship. And so, and there's nothing really a company in that situation, maybe nothing a company could have done. They couldn't have provided an extra lunch and learn or workshop. Like, it's difficult. And that's where it's not black and white for the solutions, but where coaching really shines in supporting that individual and their personal experience.
I love it. Have the conversation. don't think it has to be confrontational.
Hmm.
Just come in with a mindset where you've prepared and you've laid out the facts and demonstrated your commitment still where you can.
Hmm.
But you can't control how people react. And if the reaction isn't the desired reaction, then you sort of have some answers. But
Yeah.
Kelsey, very fantastic stuff. Thank you for coming on the
Thank you for
Frontline
having me.
Advantage, and appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.